Mr. Organ.
Welcome back to Worldview Talk Show. With us today, we have Richard Jones from Christian Pentecostal Church, and he's in charge of the Overcomers Group. And I'd like to speak about the topic today, which is From Bondage to Liberty, a Journey to Freedom. Richard, would you like to explain a little bit about what that title means to you?
It means coming out of, actually what it said, coming out of addiction, number one, and not being bound by addictive substances.
Fantastic. I would also like to start off with, all right, so what was your life like before getting involved into drugs, and how long, how old were you when it started?
I was about 18 years old when I first experienced using any type of drug.
Okay.
And shortly afterwards, I joined the military. It's no fault of militaries, but I was sent to Southeast Asia for my first assignment, which was Thailand. And it was a 13-month tour. And drugs were in abundance in Thailand. And everybody was doing them, basically. It was like a fun type of thing,
right.
You know. So that's how I really got started, never thinking that I would become addicted to any of these things.
Right.
It was just to be, you know, to be in the know, so to speak.
Okay. So what was your life like before that, considering that this isn't something that you ever really thought that you would do?
My life prior to that, my childhood was kind of like not the exactly ideal type of childhood. I grew up with my grandparents, which I was very unhappy about that. I was emotional a lot, anxious a lot. If I just go back into the story, my parents took us to my grandparents one day, and they said they were going away, but I was a kid and I couldn't really, accurately comprehend what they meant. And they left. I went to bed and when I woke up, they weren't there.
Wow.
So that put me in a very bad space. And for years, I dealt with that space.
How old were you around?
About 4 years old.
Okay.
And I had a problem adjusting, and I was angry a lot.
Right.
And it's just a downward spiral as opposed to, upward mobility. It was more like a downward spiral.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get involved in the military? Is that something that you greatly desired, or?
Well, it was something to do. It had been a tradition in my family. Both my brothers had served. One was still serving at the time. My oldest brother had served, and my youngest brother was in before I went in, because he went in like 17.
Okay.
And my uncles and everybody was in the war during World War II. So I thought it was an honorable thing to do. I wasn't working. Jobs were very scarce. This was like early in the 60s.
Okay.
There just weren't any jobs around, that was paying anything. So military was the best place for me to be.
Okay. So as you were in the military, and that's where you found drugs, were the people that were in charge part of those enablers, or was it just everyone that was kind of around you?
Some of the people in charge, they weren't supposed to be, socializing like that.
Right.
But after duty hours, they did, even the officers.
Okay.
I'm not saying high-ranking officers, but like field officers and NCOs.
Right.
They did indulge in using these drugs. And nobody was testing anybody for drugs in Southeast Asia, not at all.
Right, right.
No tests started going on until late after I left Vietnam, when heroin became a big problem in Vietnam, and a lot of guys started getting addicted on heroin.
So I'd imagine that would impact their capability of, being a productive fighter.
Well, actually, everybody knew fighting, nobody took drugs in the field.
Okay.
If anybody took drugs in the field and it was found out, they were court-martialed.
Okay.
This was a thing that people did back in the rear. This was a thing that people did in the base camps. Had nothing to do with being in the field because, you had to be 100% alert, even on guard duty.
Right.
You didn't have to be in the field. You could just be on guard duty, doing perimeter guard or something. If they caught you with any kind of drugs, you were in a lot of trouble.
Right.
I can tell you, I got busted. I didn't even, I wasn't on guard duty, but somebody told on me that I had drugs. And I was put in for a special court-martial. And they took my security clearance from me. And they put me in another unit, grave registrations.
Okay.
And I just dealt with bodies and stuff like that.
Oh.
But for 6 months, and finally they reduced the court-martial from a special court-martial to a summary, and from a summary to a field grade Article 15, and then they just threw the whole thing out.
Oh, wow.
And I had to wait until my tour was over in Vietnam to come back to the States to get reinstated. But the problem was still that I still had the addiction and still had the craving for drugs.
Right. So was there anything that you might have experienced on the field or, while you were there that you might have ran to drugs more because of trying to hide or, cover up any memories or things like that you might have tried to not remember?
I medicated a lot when I came home, and I reached out to the VA, and they took me in-house and they treated me.
Okay.
And their final diagnosis was drug addiction with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I was treated for that. And I still have a support group for PTSD, which I attend every week.
Fantastic.
With guys that have similar situations to mine, and that we can all identify with certain things that other folks just wouldn't be able to identify with.
Right.
So we just talk every week for an hour and a half.
That's great. That's got to be very...
And hold each other up,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
It's got to be very
Because we're getting to
too.
be older guys now, and some guys are breaking down, and they're having physical problems and what have you, kidney problems, all kinds of cancer from exposure to the herbicides, and
Okay.
So we're a support group for everybody that's struggling.
That's fantastic. That's really important. So what made you decide, I guess this was probably a part of it when you got home. That's when you realized that you needed to quit.
It wasn't just when I first got home. It was some years after I came home. I realized I needed to quit because I was married then and I was trying to raise a family.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was living a dysfunctional life, and it caused a lot of problems in the home. So I started looking for help. That's when I first started going to VA. That's when I first started going to Narcotics Anonymous and those kinds of places trying to get help.
Right.
I got in-house a few times in a few places. I went to detox. Detox is what I mean.
Right.
But they didn't really help. They helped for a while, but as soon as I came back out, I was getting back in trouble again because I didn't change friends and I didn't change locations. And, people, places, and things.
Right, very important to...
Yeah.
That's something that even my pastor had talked about recently. He was talking about worship, and when you spend your own time with God behind the scenes, that's evident, as you walk. It's evident that you spend time with God, and he was talking about, just like when you go to someone's house, and if they smoke cigarettes and you don't, you're going to walk out of there smelling like cigarettes. So it's very important for all of us to realize what surrounds us, that it ends up impacting us.
Yes.
So what entity did you reach out to? So when you started, to go to those places that you said that you would go to?
Well, I was reaching out to, outpatient groups. I was dealing with Narcotics Anonymous.
Okay.
I was dealing with AA because if I didn't have drugs, I drank. And I started going to those programs because I wanted to try to keep my family together.
Right.
And but they weren't working for me, and I don't want to kick any of those groups. It largely had to do with me. When people first come into these groups, they bring their attitudes into the groups.
Okay.
And what happens is, if you start hearing voices about, because a lot of times people glorify the thing as opposed to really looking for help.
Okay.
And what happens then, it kind of turns your mind around, and as soon as you run into somebody out there in the street,
right,
that's using or got the drug, you'll slip back into it again. And, that's what happened to me until I found the Overcomers.
Okay.
And I stumbled upon the Overcomers. I just happened to stumble upon the Overcomers. I had OD'd, and I was in the hospital. And when I came around, the doctor said to me at that time, and I was in my 40s. I was up in my mid-40s.
Okay.
And he simply said to me, "What were you doing last night?" And I said to him, "Well, I was just, hanging out, drinking." So he said to me, "No." And, because, of course, they had ran tests and everything. So he said to me, he says, "You're too old to continue this kind of lifestyle." He said, "You're very fortunate to be alive today." He said, we resuscitated you last night.
Wow.
And you came in here head first. But he said, if you continue,
right,
the next time you'll probably come in here foot first.
Right.
We'll do all we can to save you. But if we can't save you, you're going out foot first.
Wow.
So he said to me, "Do yourself a favor," and I was sober. He said, "Choose life." I had never heard that in my life before.
Wow.
That was the most profound thing I ever heard. Choose life. So I thought about it all day. I really thought about it all day. And while I was in this ICU unit, there was a man coming through, cleaning the place. And he said to me, "I don't know what your problem is, but whatever it is," he says, "Jesus Christ can heal you." So he said, "If you want to be healed, repeat after me." So he led me in the sinner's prayer.
That's beautiful.
And I followed him in the sinner's prayer, but I thought about it all day long. And I still couldn't believe that anything was going to happen because I did that.
Right.
But the results came after I got out of the ICU unit and went into a regular hospital ward. I realized that I didn't have a craving for drugs.
My God.
I didn't have a desire for cigarettes.
Wow.
And at that time, in those days in the hospital, they had areas where your visitors could smoke. You could leave the room. You could go down the hall to smoke if you was ambulatory patient, what have you. But I chose not to, and I had cigarettes, and I chose not to. And I think largely because I found out there are triggers when you do this stuff, right? One of the triggers I think I had was cigarettes.
Okay.
And I already mentioned the kind of people I used to hang around.
Right.
Because when I used to leave the detox, I leave the detox clean. No cigarettes, no alcohol, no drugs, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Then sooner or later, I'll pick up a cigarette.
Uh-huh.
And then you start associating with the people again. You go in the
Yes.
bar, you say, I'm not going to drink anything.
Right.
But cigarettes and alcohol is synonymous. And so a whole lot of other things when it comes down to drugs. Cigarettes and all these things are synonymous. So you
Right.
found yourself going in a circle. So I think in the back of my mind, I made a decision that I wasn't going to smoke cigarettes anymore. And I made an immediate decision that I wasn't going to hang out with the same people that I had hung out with before.
That's
I
amazing.
cut myself off from everybody. Everybody that I knew that was using anything, I cut myself off. So that's how I got on the right street. And the brother, I already knew about Christian Pentecostal Church, but I didn't know anything about the Overcomers.
Right.
And this fellow told me, that led me to say this prayer. He says, there's a drug program at my church, and he told me where it was. And I went to a meeting. And when I went to a meeting, I felt like that was a place I wanted to be.
Wow.
Because it was unlike any other 12-step meeting that I had gone into. You know, I'm not kicking 12-step,
Right.
no 12-step, because I did them all. I did AA, NACA, every one of the anonymous groups that dealt with substance abuse. I dealt with all of them, but I got my sobriety through
Christ.
through the Overcomers.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a whole different type of atmosphere, environment, and I started learning some things I didn't know before. I had no experience in reading a Bible. It was something I wasn't interested in when I was growing up.
Right.
My grandparents couldn't handle me, force me into it. I just wouldn't accept it because I was angry. I just didn't want it, you know. And I was bent on doing destruction.
Right. And, you know, it's interesting to hear you say, you know, that the man or the doctor told you to choose life.
Yeah.
And then from there on, the door to life was opened to you. And it might have been open before, but you were just too lost, really, to see it.
You know, and ironically, since I've been in church, I believe it's in the book of Deuteronomy when God says to the people, he says, I set before you today blessings and cursings.
Yep.
You understand? And choose life. So I heard that. And there's another scripture that I heard when they used to say people, places, and things.
Yeah.
It's found in 1 Corinthians 15:33. It says, bad company corrupts good character.
Yes.
To your shame, it says, some people
Yes.
are ignorant of God. So I realized that if you hang around people that's ignorant of God, you know, a lot of times, not a lot of time, most of the times, living things are shaped by the environment that they live in. So, you know, if you're in that environment, you're going to be shaped by it. It's just sooner or later, you know, you can't say you're going to go in the bar and save everybody in the bar.
Right.
You know, you can't go any place where they're using drugs and tell everybody to stop because you stop, you know. So, but like I said, you have to choose where you go and choose who you hang out with.
It's funny that you say that. It reminds me of something that my father would always tell me, because I would always think and hope that my, you know, good ways, or, you know, I was always very happy and very positive. I would always hope that that could be attractive, not just attractive to another, but, you know, that would rub off on other people. And he would always tell me, he would give me the example of how much easier it is to gain weight than it is to lose weight, or how much easier it is, you know, all the negative, all of that, those are easy to come to us. You know, those are easy things. Those are things we have to choose to cut off, but then they have to be replaced. But for the longest time, I didn't want to believe, you know, I'm like, oh, Dad, you're just being so extra. But it's just the truth.
Yeah.
You know.
You know, it's funny that you say that. It's the negative things. And if you have a negative mindset, what happens is, you know, you gravitate towards negative people too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't want to you don't gravitate towards positive people because you don't want to hear anything positive.
Right.
You know, because you want to continue doing. In my case,
Well,
I want to
in
continue
our flesh.
doing what I want to do.
Right.
I stayed away from my family members. Neither one of my brothers used any drugs. My oldest brother, he just like, he couldn't believe it. He was done when he saw me messed up.
Yeah.
You know, and but I got myself straight before he passed away.
Okay.
And I apologize to him because, you know, I abused him too. You know, when you're an addict, you use people because they're sympathetic with you, you know?
Right.
So I used him a lot. And he was always hoping that I was going to get my life straight, and I couldn't do it. But when I did get straight, I went straight to him. I had to apologize to a lot of people. I've made a lot of amends.
That's beautiful.
Because I messed up with a lot of folks.
And that's an important part of your healing.
Yes, it is. I mean, in that way, I'm really free. I don't feel like, you know, I'm in bondage. In as much as owing anybody an apology for what I've done, you know, even to my kids, you know, because they remember.
Right.
You know, they don't bring it up, but they remember.
I remember.
Yeah, they remember. And I have a special kind of relationship with my son. He's a former serviceman himself.
Okay.
And we talk about a lot of stuff, you know. And he doesn't live in New York now, but we talk every day almost.
That's good.
And he'll remind me of things that I used to do. And he kind of like laugh about them, you know, like in a joking way. But he know how messed up I was at sometimes, you know. He was telling me one time about when I was messed up, how I wrecked my car.
Oh, God.
And I didn't know how I wrecked it.
Wow.
But he told me where it was and what happened. And he's in the car with me. So, you know, but I had to make amends for those things. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, and that's definitely an important part of healing.
Yeah.
Not just for the people around you, but of course for yourself, you know, to stay there.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to say, you know, also, I wasn't a good role model to my kids when they were growing up, but they saw me. I remember them passing me in the street and blowing the horn in the car and keep going, you know, because they were ashamed of me. And because I'd be hanging out with these guys out there in the street. And people say, who's those people, man? I said, my kids. And why they don't stop? You know, I couldn't tell them why they didn't stop.
Right.
But you know what I did? After I got my life straight, I started looking for jobs, and I found out that I weren't qualified, even though I was able to hold down a job for 20 years because I had a certain position. My boss could never touch me. I had a job where nobody never saw me.
Okay.
They just knew I was producing, right? So it was a big factory job, and I was in production, but I was behind the scenes supplying.
Okay.
So, that kind of work went out. I was used to pumping. I went to all the big companies like Exxon and Texaco and everybody that was looking for those jobs.
Right.
But I couldn't find another job like that. They wanted to start me in the bottom, wanted to make me a tank cleaner. I didn't want to go in any tanks.
Wow.
So I decided I wanted to go back to school. So I went back to school.
That's beautiful.
I went to school. I looked in the catalog. In the back of the catalog, there was a section back there for scholarships. It says they had awards for Vietnam War veterans.
Wow.
So I went to school on the Vietnam Veterans Tuition Award. And in doing so, my kids noticed. And they were just doing mediocre things, you know? But every one of them went back to school and got a degree. Every one of them, they went like, heck, if Dad can do it, we can do it too, you know. So, you know, I think that some good came out of this, you know, and they're doing well today.
Yes.
So, very well today, matter of fact. So I have no qualms with how they're living. And neither one of them are drug addicts or alcoholics or anything. My son works with FEMA in Washington. He just told me last night he's getting ready for another promotion.
Fantastic.
And I'm just proud of how things worked out for them.
Yeah. You know, and that's such a blessing to see how much God's hand was really on your life as an umbrella to your whole entire family. Because so many times, as we all have known and heard other people that have either dealt with any sort of addictions or dealt with any kind of trauma, you would think that the children would steer away from that, but a lot of times they would end up going down that road. And it's hard for us to understand that, but it's the same thing. You become, your environment. Yeah. But that's just so much more evident on God's testimony in your life, how he covered you,
Yeah, I mean, and that's not the only way. I can't count the ways that I should not be here today. Not only the experience I had in the hospital, but there are things that happen when you're out there in that world.
Right.
There are things that happen that I know for sure if God wasn't with me then, I wouldn't be here today because I've seen death.
Wow.
I mean, I know what it is.
Right.
I mean, right here in New York City, and I'm not just talking about what I saw overseas, but I'm talking about right here in New York City, resulting from drugs.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that you used to, do drugs with, or anything that you're able to impact them and, allow your testimony to take them to choose life?
There was one fellow. There was only one that I was able to talk to that made a choice for the Lord.
That's awesome.
And unfortunately, he passed away. But I told every one of them, and a lot of them, they really thought it was funny. They called me Reverend, because the overcomers, we use the steps, but we use Bible scripture.
Right.
And these guys, they weren't used to me using Bible scripture. And I bring them in, they'll come in and stay for one meeting or two meetings, and they wouldn't come back anymore. And I would go by and pick them up, and one guy in particular, he's gone too. He says, "Not today, Rev. Not today, but you got $5." So, but... and it's funny, these groups, most folks don't really want to come through seemingly a Christian fellowship. Mm-hmm. It's something about it that they don't want to touch. I don't know what it is. Maybe I can, because I didn't want to be involved either, because, you have to, be walking straight.
Right, because it's pure.
It's pure.
Yeah.
And most people don't want to walk straight. They want to have it both ways.
Right.
So they'll come once or twice, and they don't come back anymore, or they say, I went some other place.
Right.
So, but I think that if someone come, I got a chance to plant a seed.
Yes.
I don't care what step I'm in, I got a chance to plant a seed.
Yes.
Because I try to study for every step before I present a step and look for the scripture, and I look for special words, in a sentence. There are key words that you need to bring out to make people understand. If they're not exercising that particular aspect of their life, then they're just stumbling.
Right.
Like a word, for example, willing. You have to become willing to do anything.
Yes.
So...
Well, I've been so blessed to hear your testimony, and I thank God for choosing you as you chose life for him to do his will, and I pray that he continues to use you and will allow each and every seed to really be produced that you have planted, because I believe that he had his hand over your life for a great purpose.
Sure.
So I thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
And so we thank you so much again for tuning in to World Talk View Show. Until next time, be blessed.